Tim here, ITIYL, episode 15, 1-5. Thanks for joining me, as always. Really look forward to talking to you all, as always. You guys know this stuff by now. Why do I keep saying it? Maybe I have new listeners. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why I keep saying it. But hey, as always, this will forever be a hobby, so I always enjoy coming back with you all with some cool topics to talk about and just to revisit some topics from last week. And a lot to talk about this week. There are some key topics that I'm really passionate about that I wanted to bring up. One that actually has been on my mind even since like high school, that kind of like got molded and shaped throughout the years, and finally at a point where I feel like I can accurately articulate it. And these are very mature conversations that I've had with several of my friends, some of which you already know, like Ryan, like Charles, etc. And I'm really looking forward to bringing up some topics that I'm really passionate about. So, all right, without further ado, let's dive right into the Idle Thoughts segment. This week on Idle Thoughts, we have one listener, two friends, and they share their thoughts on some topics that we covered last week. Last week, as you know, if you tuned in, I talked about some topics that I was very passionate about. You can kind of hear it in my voice. It kind of lost it a bit. Very passionate about certain topics. One of which being the "This Is America" video. "This Is America" video that was released by Childish Gambino was very symbolic, was very powerful. Had brought up, either revisited or brought up a lot of points that are going on in America today, whether it just be with media, whether it just be with violence, whether it be with race. A lot of things got brought up to the video. And if you haven't watched the video yet, what are you waiting for? I just go and do it. Stop this right now. Go and do it. And look at maybe some of the breakdown videos too. And still to this day, one of my favorite things about the video is the video in and of itself proves the most powerful point on how easily distracted we are. If you watch the video for the very first time, you're watching Donald, or rather Childish Gambino, dance and juke and groove, and him and the kids, they're just dancing and they're at the forefront, and you're like watching them the whole time, whether it be because he's dancing or whether because of he's the star of the video, he's the center of attention, or whether you just want to listen to what he's saying. You're watching him, and there's so much stuff going on in the background you don't even notice, and then maybe something catches your attention and you're like, oh, whoa, what's that? Or maybe you see something during the second time you watch the video or the third time you watch the video. You're like, wow. I found that personally, the second and third time that I watched the video, I actually didn't look at Gambino much at all. I was looking at what was going on in the background, and I wasn't the only one. Anthony, who's been a long-time listener of the show, who has even wrote into the show a few times, and even participated in the ITIYL gift card giveaway, called in. He tuned in for an interview, and again, Anthony, I really appreciate it. And he shared his thoughts on what the video meant to him and what his reaction was. Here's Anthony. Check this out.
Hello, everyone. On today's episode of ITIYL and this segment of ITIYL Thoughts, we have Anthony, who's been a long-time listener. Hey, Anthony, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, man. I'm up a little bit earlier than I would like, but I was really excited to get you on the phone, so I definitely made some time to get you in and interview you. All right, so last week we talked about a few different things, and including Donald Glover's, a.k.a. Childish Gambino. And I think at this point more people actually know him as Childish Gambino. But he released some new music on SNL called "This Is America," along with a very, very powerful video. So I wanted to see if you got a chance to see it and or hear it yet, and what were your thoughts and how did it affect you?
No problem. So, yes, I did see it. Actually, 2 minutes after it was uploaded, I watched it because I'm a Childish Gambino stan. I love his work. I think I got on him when his mixtape, Not a Rapper 3, I think, or I'm Just a Rapper 3, whatever it was called. That's when I was on Childish Gambino. So I've been a big fan of him for a long time. I've been saying for years this guy was a creative genius. He's like extremely talented, and I guess many people overlooked him. And with this video coming out, he's starting to get the attention that I was trying to get people to see back then. The video was absolutely marvelous. I have to give shout outs to the director for it. I don't know the director's name. Oh, wait, I think you said it was Hyro in your last podcast. The director was Hyro, but the video was fantastic. It definitely deserves it needs more than one watch. When the first time I watched it, I was just noticing dancing and all this subliminal messages. I didn't get it until I saw the death riding the white horse. My dad's a pastor, so I kind of have to know the Bible quotes and all that. So that's what really got me to watch it again. And seeing it again, I was seeing everything in the background, the dancing was being the distractions of what's really going on. So it was a deep video, and I actually like the fact that when Childish Gambino is on the interview, he's not going to explain the video. He said it's not his place to explain it. It's art, which I think that's great. That's what art is supposed to do.
One of the other questions that I brought up last week and asked Anthony this time around was if the video was actually an accurate representation of what's going on nowadays, or if it was just an exaggeration. Here's what he had to say.
No, not an exaggeration at all. In fact, I think that was dumbed down because especially what's going on with people calling the cops for people barbecuing. Caucasian people calling African Americans, calling the cops for African Americans that are barbecuing. There's a lot of things getting ridiculous, and I feel like African Americans are put in the forefront as rappers, as artists, as basketball players to be a distraction to what's really going on with us because that's what they want us to see. They want us to see them for their entertainment. So in a way, we're kind of a new age slaves.
Now, another cool thing about Anthony, part of the reason he and I are good friends is he's also a nerd, specifically a black nerd. And one of the topics last week that we discussed was the way being a nerd or being a geek is viewed within the black community, especially growing up. And we approached the whole argument that that resurfaced last week and the week before about black women and just women in general not liking nerds. Here's something what Anthony had to say.
I'm head to tails with it. I'm in between because, in my opinion, you're attracted to what you're attracted to. Not every female goes after the nerd because it's cool. Maybe they generally like nerds. Maybe this is what their preference is. Now, on the other side, yes, I do see a lot of people trying to be attracted to nerds because that is the cool thing now. Especially with all the Marvel movies coming out, they need someone in the movie theater to explain what in the world is going on, just to have them by their side. I even have friends like that. I saw Infinity War with one of my buddies. He don't read comic books at all, but he paid for my ticket to go with him just so he could understand what's going on in the movie. Now, I don't know, because in my opinion, these women, they say they don't want nerds, and then at the end of the day, I feel like they want whatever is going to be the trend at the moment. They're just pretty much trend following. Because in high school, because me and my friends were in the comic books or in the video games, and the majority of the demographic that was making fun of us was the African American females. Now, with the Caucasian females, they're just accepting us for who we are. They were like, all right, you're in the comic books, then you're in the comic books. I feel like they're a little bit more accepting to it when it comes to the race. Caucasians more accepting to accept comic book nerds as African American females are. Now, again, I say still, you won't know until you actually go for it. My girlfriend, she's Haitian, so she's Haitian American, and she's in the comic book stuff just like I am. So it's always that you never know until you try, really. So it's kind of a hard topic to really pinpoint an answer for it because you don't really know.
Now, Anthony brought up some really good points and articulated them well. And of course, that's something we definitely encourage here on ITIYL, open-mindedness and just the ability to consider both sides of the coin. As you can hear, Anthony was a little bit torn on some of the arguments where he could see both sides of it. And that's a lot of what I, encourage a lot of people to do. Just hear something, internalize it, digest it, and then try to decide which side of the fence you're on instead of just instantly reacting. Anthony has also been listening for the show for quite some time, like I mentioned earlier. And he had a suggestion on a topic that he would like to hear revisited, and gave some pretty good points about that topic as well.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this before. If you did, it was probably just really quick. Now that Childish Gambino's in the forefront, everyone's getting on him that saying he can't be pro-black and date or be married to a white woman. I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Personally, I totally disagree with that. Just because you're pro-black doesn't mean you're anti-white. And then we have people like Barack Obama, J. Cole, Colin Kaepernick, who were raised by white women, but still, they're very pro-black. They have the first African-American president. We have Colin Kaepernick, who was taking the knee because he didn't, because of the injustice that's going on in America. And then we have J. Cole, whose, recent album, KOD, was talking about, all his albums really talked about issues in the black community. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, hey, Anthony, thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. I appreciate you listening to the show, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me here.
Good stuff there from Anthony. And again, Anthony, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, dude. I can't wait to see you in person and hopefully get another interview in the future. Now, if you're like Anthony and you have some thoughts and you have some opinions about a topic that's covered in the show, or even a topic that's covered on a previous episode, hey, reach out to me. I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com, or follow me on Twitter at ITIYL_ITIYL. And you can mention me on Twitter. You can DM me on Twitter. If you know me personally, hey, text me, call me, say, hey, I liked the Idle Thought segment when Anthony brought this up. I liked the Idle Thought segment when this was brought up. And I definitely want to be a part of that. Or, hey, I have some thoughts I want to share. Or, hey, I disagree with you, and here's why. I would love to have those thoughts featured on the show. And, of course, if you're comfortable with it, I would like to have the show feature you for an interview. Next on Idle Thoughts, we have Katie. Now, the reason it was important for me to have Katie on is because there were two topics that I brought up last week that I felt was that I was really passionate about, and I think it was really important to have a young lady's perspective and a young lady's opinion. I thought it would be more impactful to have a young lady speak on the two particular topics. One of being, again, the whole nerd thing. Do women like nerds, especially growing up? Are they okay with it? And Katie, being a nerd herself, you kind of see a theme here. I promise you it's not intentional. But Katie, being a nerd herself, actually spoke to a really unique perspective on what it was like from her experience growing up as a nerd, and why she feels as though women didn't necessarily flock towards the nerds. Here's Katie.
For me, my experience was quite different because I was a female nerd. And when I was real little, I got most of my nerdiness from my dad. My dad played lots of video games, read fantasy novels. He actually introduced me to anime. So I went into this thinking this was something I was allowed to have, anime and video games and stuff. This was something that girls could do. And then when I showed interest with the stuff for school, the sort of sports popular guys, they didn't really care. The nerd boys were like, I'm sorry, that was on the other page of this comic. You're incorrect. And it just sort of hurt. And it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth about nerd boys for a really long time until I managed to try again in a new school when I was much older. So it just sort of felt weird. But then when I got older, it seemed like everybody changed. The boys were a little bit more accepting. It was like I became a unicorn instead of a freak. And I don't know how it is for girls that are outside the nerd circle, but that's how it was for me as a girl inside the nerd circle.
Now, a point that Katie brought up that I thought was pretty cool was she was taught that it was okay to be a nerd. How about that? How many young ladies do you know, especially the ones that make fun of nerds growing up or don't really want to associate with the nerds? How many young ladies do you know that were taught that, like, hey, this is okay. This is acceptable behavior. It's okay to watch anime. It's okay to be into video games. It's okay to be into really nerdy music. Hey, it's okay to, be into comic books. How many young ladies do you know that were actually raised like that and raised that it was okay? I think Katie brought up a really good point there. Katie also touched on the topic that was brought up last week about dating a woman and during the courting phase. Are women taught to believe and are women raised to believe that their time is worth more than a man's? That a woman doesn't have to put as much effort to get the man's attention, and that the man has to put forth more effort to get the woman's attention? A woman doesn't necessarily need to refine her craft or her art unless it's just for self-improvement. Meanwhile, a man has to do everything underneath the sun to get the woman's attention and to impress her. So I asked Katie's opinion on that, and she had a unique perspective. Here's what she had to say.
I was taught the opposite, actually. My time is worth less. And it was sort of through all of these different social cues. If I wanted to spend more time with a person, then I was being clingy. And it was very dangerous territory to be categorized as clingy, because the second you got categorized as clingy, it was like evacuation. And then, but if you didn't want to spend a whole lot of time with your boyfriend, whoever you wanted to spend time with, then you were cold. And why would they bother being in a relationship with someone who doesn't want to spend time with them?
Interesting bring up there from Katie. Now, this is a topic that I'm going to revisit, and maybe even as soon as next week. And I would really like to get more young ladies' input or feedback about this topic. Maybe someone who has a different experience than what Katie had, or even if it's a similar experience. I want you to tell me, is that just a myth? Do women have to work just as hard as men do when it comes to the whole dating and courting phase, the honeymoon phase, the puppy love phase? Or is it the man that has to make sure that the woman is oppressed and the woman is taken care of? Let me know, guys. I hope to have one of you featured next week to express your thoughts and opinions. Katie hasn't been listening for long. This upcoming episode will actually be the first episode in full that she'll be listening to. And she had a good topic to bring up that she would like to hear in the future. Here's Katie.
Well, I'm not sure if you've covered this before, but one of the things I've been sort of thinking about in my head lately is how to deal with arguing for yourself against a person's construct of you. Because I've run into this frequently in the past couple of months, where someone has a construct of who I am in their head, but it's not accurate to who I am. And so when I get into an argument, they're like, but you're going to say this. And it's like, no, I'm not. And it becomes this interesting thing, this parallel between who you are as a person and how people have constructed you to be in their own heads.
Oh, that's definitely a good topic to bring up, and it definitely has to be attacked from a very particular and my favorite open-minded angle. Well, hey, Katie, thank you so much for calling in. Thank you for giving your opinions. Thank you for giving your thoughts. And I really appreciate the interview, and hopefully I'll get another one in the future.
You're very welcome, Tim.
Good stuff there from Katie. Thanks again, Katie. I really appreciate it. Katie had a lot of fun during the interview. Why is it that the young ladies have more fun in their interview than the guys do? I think the guys enjoy it, but the young ladies would really get really excited. Behind the scenes after the call, Katie was like, hey, when you're doing another one, I want to do it. So she was pretty excited about it. So thanks again, Katie. Now, good bring up there by Katie about the preconceived constructs that we have on people. The experience that I like to talk about that is my older brother. My oldest brother is 9 years older than I am. So he was out of the house before I was even in middle school for the most part. He was engaged before I graduated. He had a career before I graduated high school. So he was in the full swing of things before I was even a man. And in his eyes, I'll always be his little brother. And one story I like to tell there is, I remember one time, it's been a good bit since I've seen him, probably almost about a year, maybe about 9 months or so. And I was going to go visit him, and he lived in the suburbs. I lived in the city. So, if you're familiar with the Philadelphia area, I live in Philly. He lived in Springfield Township at the time. So he was a ways away from the part of the city that I lived in. So I went to go travel to get to him. And in his mind, oh, it's my little brother Tim coming to come see me. And he's, like I mentioned, it's been a bit since you've seen me. So actually, now that I think about it, I want to say it was more than a year. And I'm on my way to go see him. I'm on the phone. I'm like, hey, I'm on my way. I'm catching a train out to go and see him. I'm meeting him at the train station, and he's coming to come, pick me up, and we're going to head on over to his place. And I didn't hear him say this on the phone. I guess I was just too concerned about not getting lost. But he told me when I get off the bus to find a bench and just sit down and wait for him. I didn't hear him say that. When I finally met up with him at the train station, I kind of was just taking in the sights, and there was a plaza across the street. So I went to go across the street from the plaza, and I was just looking around. He called me like, hey, where are you at? I'm like, hey, I'm over here at the plaza just checking stuff out. He came to get me, and he was like, hey, I really respect him for doing this, because not only does it take a lot for like a man to admit like, hey, I was wrong, but more importantly, this is my older brother we're talking about, who's like extremely prideful, extremely proud, and more importantly, I'm his little brother. I'm his kid brother. I'm his youngest brother. So he's like, who am I to answer to you, kind of, that type of mentality. So I get in the car, and he goes, hey, little bro, I just want to first and foremost just apologize. In my mind, you're my little brother, and the last image I have of you in my head is of being my little brother. So when I told you to just sit on the bench like you're a kid, I'm sorry about that. You're a grown man. And I shouldn't have said that. And I was like, wow, I really appreciate the apology. I didn't even notice you saying that, by the way, but I really appreciate the apology. Thank you. So that was my personal experience. And of course I have many others of like people having this, preconceived notion of who you are as a person. So they based all of their interactions with you around those preconceived notions. So good bring up there by Katie, and definitely something that I definitely want to bring up again in the future. I really want to touch base again, and I want to really dive into the whole topic of conversation just a little bit more clearly on the whole courting phase for a man. So you look at for like a man growing up, right? A man's either constantly told or taught, whether it's directly or indirectly, whether it's from, believe it or not, from his mother. It's usually from his mother. Or from his father, from media, from all these different things, teachers, older siblings, whatever. They're taught like, hey, you're the man, you're supposed to approach the woman. You're supposed to come up to the woman. You're supposed to approach the woman. You're supposed to court her. You're supposed to take her out. You're supposed to ask her out on a date. You're supposed to ask her, where does she want to go? You're supposed to go and pick her up. You're supposed to drop her off. These are things that you have to do. A man has to work for the woman's time. Oh, you have to wear extremely nice clothes. You have to impress her on a date. There was a topic of conversation that came up on Facebook for me on my timeline that asked like, hey, men, when you take a young lady out to dinner, and the whole concept of the post even proves my point, because it assumes that the man was the one that initiated everything and had to take the woman out to dinner. But it says, hey guys, hey fellas, when you take a young lady out to dinner, do you set a budget or a price point on what she can and can't order, or like hey, this is my budget for the night, and or do you just let her order whatever she wants? And then the director's like, hey, young ladies, do you ask, hey, can you kind of like just order anything? Do you ask about the budget, or do you kind of like do you order the cheapest thing, or do you kind of just go nuts? And you got varying answers, some of the more respectable answers that I like from a lot of young ladies. So there's still hope, fellas. There's still hope out there. There are a lot of good young ladies with their head on their shoulders. Some young ladies are like, hey, I personally don't leave out the house unless I have at least X amount of dollars on me. The dollar amount was different for each young lady. One young lady said $50, another young lady said $100, another young lady said $20. They said, hey, I make sure I have at least cash on me so that way I can contribute to the meal or at least leave the tip. And I like that a lot. I like that concept. Like, hey, if I take a young lady out to dinner, or hey, if we're going out to dinner and like, hey, I pay for the meal, and I want to pay for the meal because as a man, I feel like I need to, you're at least willing to tip. Like, hey, well, okay, hey, you take care of the main bill and I'll just leave the tip, and I'll leave the tip in cash. So that way it doesn't have to come off the card, or so that way you don't have to leave it, or or what have you. And you're more likely, especially if you got good service, to give a generous tip that way, because now I don't have to worry about calculating the total from what the total of the meal was plus whatever the 18 or 20% or 15% tip is going to be. Now you can just straight tip however much you feel like tipping, and it could be a really good tip for the server that evening, especially if they were good. So I really like that answer. But there were some young ladies on there was like, hey, no, if he wants to impress me, if he wants to have a second date, if he wants to go far, then I need to know that he's willing to, spend however much on me, And I kind of looked at that, like there's some young ladies out there who genuinely think that, like, hey, look, if he really wants me, he'll impress me and things like that. And it just goes to my original point, like, where does that come from? Like, who told you that you have to be the one that, of course, absolutely you have to be impressed. Absolutely, this person has to be worth your time, but you have to be worth theirs too. Like, it's an equilibrium that has to be met. Like, you can't just be the young lady going, oh, he has to impress me, he has to cater to me, he has to show me a good time. No, it has to be the other way around too. You have to show that your head is on your shoulders. You have to show that, you're giving good advice. You're making great conversation. You're bringing up good topics of conversation. You're fun to be around. You're funny. You have a sense of humor. You express interest in what some of the things that he's got going on. It's a two-sided thing. It's a two-way street. And there are like a lot of young ladies on that post that were just like, oh no, me. Then, unfortunately enough, there were like some guys on the post who were like, no, I don't tell her what the budget is. She can get whatever she wants because this will determine on I'm editing and paraphrasing what he said because it was pretty vulgar and it's not that type of show. But he basically said the first date will determine if she even wants to see you again and if you're going to get rewarded towards the end of the night. Which is another like topic for another conversation. The whole concept of like, hey, I have to impress her to get what I want. Like, I have to impress her to get sex at the end of the night. Or I have to impress her to get a second date and things like that. And to a degree, you absolutely should think like that as far as getting the second date goes. You want the date to go well, but it's not just like, hey, I want to impress her so she's willing to give me another shot. It's the other way around too. Like, hey, do I even want, it should be a mutual experience. The young lady should put effort into making the man want to take her out on a second date. And the young man should put effort to make sure that the lady wants to take her on a second date as well. Like, hey, are you worth my time? Both parties should feel that way. It shouldn't just be one-sided. But it just goes to show you that these things exist. People are having these conversations. People are having these arguments. And my question to you all is, where does this come from? I think a lot of it is like tradition, because a lot of it had to be. I mean, you got to take a look at like where we are. Like, relatively speaking, country isn't that old. And relatively speaking, like Western civilization, like our Western societal standards aren't really that old. Like, it feel like it's old because maybe it's been that way our whole lives. But you got to figure we've only been alive for, in most cases, a quarter of a century or barely, 30 years old, 40 years old, 35 years old. You haven't been around too much longer than, you think you have been. So, it's not that long ago. You even say like 50 years ago, even like, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, women weren't working. You know what I mean? Like, at least not in a traditional sense. Like, they were like stay-at-home wives. They were housewives, and women didn't do that. The man, if they were interested in women, had to be the sole provider. They had to be the one that could provide for the woman and provide for the kids if it got to that point. They were the one going out and working and had to put food on the table for the whole family, not just themselves. So if you look at it from a traditional sense, whether you agree with the concept or not, it was practical. It was something that had to happen. Think about it. You're a young lady, you're living at home, right? So is your mother. Your mother's living at home too. You're supporting the household in different ways, but you're not bringing in income to the household. The man is. So your father comes home. Another young man who's interested in you needs to prove to your father and maybe secondarily your mother, like, hey, I can take care of her. I can take care of her because she doesn't work. The man who provides to the household as the father, he's like, okay, can you take care of my daughter? Because she's not going to be working. You are. Can your income support her? Right. And then that cycle just continues and continues and continues. So it makes sense. Like, okay, the man has to pay for the meal. The man has to court the woman. The man has to prove to the woman, like, hey, I'm worth your time. I can support you. So like back in the day, of course, that makes sense. But now in 2018, now, like, you know, there are a lot of women who are more educated than men. You know, women graduate with degrees more often than men do, with higher GPAs than men do. There are a lot of successful women. There are a lot of women with who have their head on their shoulders, who are doing what they need to do. You know, who, whether they're supporting, if they're a single mother, supporting their children, or they don't have any kids. They work a full-time job. They work 40 hours a week. They got good benefits. They invest in a 401k. They have bank investments. Maybe they have a few CD accounts. You know, there are young ladies who they're well traveled. They like to visit festivals. They travel abroad. They you know, they're doing something every weekend. They're comfortable with who they are as a person, and they can support not only themselves, but they can support the man in their lives too. So now you live in a different world. So there's one thing to blame it on tradition, and it's really tough to break tradition. How many of us do things that we were raised to taught, we were taught and raised to do that we still do, and we don't even know why we do it? You know what I mean? Like, it's tough to get rid of a tradition. Like, when you're practicing and just doing things for such a long period of time, it can be really tough to break out of some of those habits. But at the same time, if it's not practical anymore, like, it just doesn't make sense in doing it. You know, back in the day, they used like hot plates to cook stuff. If you got a stove at home, you're not going to go out and get a hot plate. If you got a microwave at home, you're not going to go out and get a hot plate. If you got a toaster oven, you're not going to go out and get a hot plate. Like, there are more resources, you know. Obviously, at one point in time, it was tradition to go to the well and get your water for the day, so you can bathe. You're not doing that now. You know, you're being super bougie with your Evian water or your core water, and that's water for you people who aren't from Philly. But I'm going to say water because science suggests that's how it's actually pronounced. So water. So that, you know, you're going to 7-Eleven or, you know, to Acme or wherever have you, to Giant to get your water now. You're not going to the well. You know, so obviously tradition can change if you want it to. I think it's just real convenient for a lot of young ladies in general to fall back on the outdated notion of a man has to court me because it's just easier for them. Where it's not really practical anymore. I can't tell you, for all the young ladies who are listening, I can't tell you how attractive it is for a man, how much it turns a man on for you to take charge in a sense. But like, hey, no, we're going here for the night, or for you to even just approach the man from the get go, especially if the man knows you're attracted to him, and you walk up to the man and just say, hey, I find you attractive. I'd like to take you out on a date. The man goes, oh, hold up now, you know. Now, again, I said this in the past on previous episodes. You know, still let a man be a man. At the end of the day, whatever that is for him, still let his ego be expressed. Whatever that is for him. But, you know, approach a man, take initiative, offer to pay for the dinner, offer to take him out, offer to pick him up. You'd be surprised how much more receptive the man would be. Now, on the flip side, I do want to bring this up. Some people feel a little awkward being outside of their comfort zone. Like, for example, I once had a young lady tell me that it was awkward for her to be the proactive one and ask the man out because that's not like a societal standard. That's not like traditional thing. So it was awkward for her to approach the man and ask him. And then when it came to time to pay for the meal, the server even came out and placed the tab in front of the man. How about that? And the server was a woman. She assumed that the man was going to pay. So when the young lady reached over the table to grab the check, it was a little awkward exchange there, you know. So there are a lot of young ladies who, and I totally understand this, there are a lot of young ladies who, you know, they feel awkward. It's outside of their comfort zone by taking that initial charge. Hey ladies, tell me, do you feel like the reason you feel like a man has to court you is because you'd feel awkward if you were the one doing the courting, or do you feel like no, that's what a man should do? And if you feel like a man should do that, just tell me why. And just as a disclaimer, I'm hoping I don't get answers like, oh, just cuz, or that's what a man is supposed to do, or that's old fashioned, my father taught me that. Like, give some answers with some substance. Like, hey, why do you feel as though a man should do that if you feel as though a man should do that? And for the young ladies who want to be the ones to initiate everything and want to court the man and want to take the man out and want to pick him up and drop him off, how much success have you had in doing that? And if you haven't done it yet, what's stopping you? What do you need to see and or hear to help get you over that hump? So reach out, guys. I would like to hear you guys' feedback. Another topic that I wanted to dive into that I'm really, really passionate about is friendship and what defines friendship. What's a friend for you? And on Sunday, I went to the Phillies game, and go Phils. We beat the Mets, the New York Mets, 4-2 on Sunday. And I guess you can say that they met their match. I'll let that sink in for the people out there who need that to sink in. But I went to the Phillies game, and I went with my buddy Charles, and we were in a car, and we're bringing up, like, we're just talking about random things, and we brought up some friends that we don't hear from anymore, whether like friends that we both knew or friends that that were just like our friends and the other person didn't know them. But we brought up like how like it's so funny how 1 minute you're like really, really close with somebody and the next minute you're not. So a lot of people place value on their friendship. And there's another young lady who was recently upset because she felt as though when she's in someone's corner, she came and vented to me a little bit. She felt as though when she's in someone's corner, she's there for them, but when she needs something, they're not. And then I kind of think about stuff like this all the time, and not even just friendship, but just in general. When something doesn't get me upset, when I don't really see the big deal in something, I try to like open my mind up and think like, hey, why does this offend this person, or why does this bother this person? And maybe I can understand why they're upset. And just circling back to the whole friendship topic, I realized like this is going on the surface. This is going to sound obvious. This is going to sound like, well, duh. But of course, as always, I'm going to dive into it, and you guys can see where I'm coming from. So we all place value in different things when it comes to friendship. Some people place value in what you can do for me. Some people place value in time spent. Some people place value in conversation. Some people place value in how well they know your family and things of that nature. And it can vary. And I think the biggest thing is we need to be more conscious of what our values are versus what our friends' values are, because they may not be the same, and that's where conflict comes from. So situations very similar to the young lady that I mentioned earlier. Let's say your friend calls you and asks you for some money. Like, hey, dude, I fell behind on my lights. My electricity is out. I need you to pay for, I need you to loan me $100 or $50 or however much money for my electricity bill. Can you do that for me? And you go, well, yeah, sure, absolutely. Here's the money, pay me back whenever. Here you go. Now, let's say you need that friend's help. And let's say you place value in stuff like that. Let's say you place value in what a friend can do for you. And you call a friend up and you go like, hey, I don't have car fare this week. I need to put money in the tank. Could you give me like $50? Let me borrow $50 for the week until payday, and I'll get that back to you. We've all been in that situation before. Until you get to the point where you're very, very financially mature, very, very financially responsible. You've been at a point where you needed to borrow some money from a friend. Now, let's say that same friend that you lent the money said no, they can't. They can't lend it to you. They can't, whatever. Now, if you don't place value in stuff like that, you're just going to look at it as like, oh man, that sucks. This person can't do it. I got to find somebody else. Not a huge deal, right? And if that person knows you well enough and they know what your values are, they don't feel a certain kind of way in telling you like, no, I can't do it. But if you place value in that, if you place value in giving the gift, if you place value in like, hey, lending someone something and their ability to give it back to you, and they can't give it back to you, then you're going to look at it like, oh, this person is fake, or this person isn't my friend. I can't tell you how many people that I know personally who don't talk to certain friends at one point were their best friend because, and it's usually over money, they gave them money and the person didn't give them back. Now, on the surface, you just look like that. Oh, like, oh, okay, you don't trust that person. You gave them money, they didn't give it back to you. Yeah, I can understand why you don't want to be that person's friend. But underneath the surface, what it really is, hey, that person places value in what you can do and what you can't do for me. So if you can't look out for me the way I can look out for you, then you're not my friend. Some people look at it as a time. Like, hey, you're my friend as long as we can hang out together. You're my friend as long as I can see you or hear from you. And, you know, again, same deal. I can't tell you how many people I know who aren't friends with, quote unquote, their best friend anymore. Because it's like, oh, I used to hear from this person all the time. This person I used to hang out all the time. But, you know, they got a boyfriend or, hey, they got a girlfriend. And, you know, I don't see him as often anymore. So we kind of just got separated. So that person, what you really hear, like, so again, on the surface, you hear, oh, that person, you know, doesn't care about you anymore, or that person found something else to occupy their time. But no, on the surface is, underneath the surface is that person puts value on time spent. That's that person's love language. That person values time spent. So if they can't have that time spent reciprocated, they're going to feel unappreciated. Same deal. That person, you could call them up and say, hey, I need $200, and that person can just give it to you. But if you're calling that person to hang out and they keep saying no, you're going to feel like that's not your friend. Even though they just loaned you $200, you may feel like, hey, that's not really my friend because of time spent. It takes a very open-minded and very mature person to, like, Charles and I are like that. There was a period in time where Charles and I haven't spoken in years because he lived out of state. And then, you know, as soon as he came back, we picked up without missing a beat. You know, those are usually the best type of friends. I have one young lady friend who I talk to once a year. No exaggeration. You know how some people say, oh, I haven't seen you in a minute, or I haven't talked to this person in years. No exaggeration. I talk to this person every year on her birthday, and that's it. I'll call her on her birthday. I tell her happy birthday. We have like a 10 to 20 minute conversation. We catch up a bit. We try to make plans, but it doesn't happen, especially now because she's a nurse. And if you know anything about nurses, you know their shifts are crazy. But we literally talk on the phone once a year. For like the past 3 years, it's been that way. I'll call her. Hey, happy birthday. How are you? Hey, I'm fine. And then that's it. But in my mind, you know, I still love her. She still loves me. We're still close. I know I can call her and talk to her, or if there's an emergency, I know she'll be there. I don't place value in time spent. So I don't need her to be able to like, hey, I haven't seen her in a while, so she's not my friend. That's not me. Some people are like that. You know, some people are like, hey, you know, you're not my friend because we haven't hung out in such a long period of time. You know, some people place their value in that. Some people feel like that's what you need to be their friend. Some people like, hey, if we can't hang out every weekend, if we're not chilling every weekend, then you're not my friend. I don't mess with you, you know. Or hey, if you can't loan me $200 because I need it, you're not my friend, you know. And part of the reason that the young lady who vented, you know, to me earlier, and a part of the reason that maybe even some of you all maybe get upset with a friend is because your values are different. Not in the sense of like you're incompatible. You could be really, really close, but your values are different. So like if you value, for example, like, hey, you know, you needed a ride to work. I gave you a ride to work. Now I need a ride to work. You can't give me a ride to work. Oh, you're not my friend. But that person is like, but hey, we just hung out last weekend. You were just over my parents' house. That person might value time. That person like, no, we are friends because I value time. So if they don't place the same value in favors like you do, then you're going to feel like, oh, then, you know, you're not really my friend. You're not different strokes for different folks, as they say. So, hey guys, tell me what you all think. Tell me what your opinion is. I would really like to hear you guys' opinion on the whole value of friendship. What do you value in your friendship? What defines a friend for you? What type of values do you put in place in your friendship? What is a reason that maybe you stop talking to somebody? Or tell you what, here's one better. Have you ever had anyone stop talking to you and you have no idea why? Or have you ever had anyone stop talking to you and you felt like it was a silly reason? Oh, this person invited me to their baby shower. I didn't go, so they don't talk to me anymore. Oh, this person invited me to their birthday. I didn't go, so they don't talk to me anymore. Oh, this person needed a ride to the market and I couldn't do it because I was busy that day, so they don't talk to me anymore. Because then on the flip side of that, you got the person that goes, oh, this person only ever calls me when they need something. And they look at that like, oh, you only call me when you need something. You're not really my friend. Because that person doesn't put value on favors. That person puts value on time, maybe. That person puts value on how often they hear from you and how often they spend quality time with you. Think about how many of us, whether we have a Facebook friend, whether we have the equivalent of a pen pal, whether we, even if we are a gamer and you play with people online that you've never met before, but you talk to them every night, think about how much closer you may feel to them than the person that maybe you just talked to on the phone. And it's because maybe you place more value in time and you speak to this person every night when you're playing the game. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think it's okay to just cut somebody off because they can't do you a favor? Do you think it's okay to cut somebody off when every time they call you they only ask for favors? Do you think it's okay to cut somebody off if you're not spending enough time with them? And what type of person does it take to say like, hey, I'm an adult, you're an adult, you may have kids, I don't, I may have kids, you don't, hey, I may travel for work, you may not, I may work one job full time, you may work two jobs part time, maybe, our schedules don't line up. Here's another thing for me personally, personal testimony. So I work from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if I'm working, when I'm up during the day, like right now when I'm recording this, all my friends are at work. All of my main friends that I speak with on a daily basis or hang out with, they're at work right now. So if I tried to call them right now, they couldn't talk. They wouldn't be able to talk. When I get off of work, it's 10:30 at night, for the most part. When I get home, it's 11:30 at night. Unless I know you're a night owl like me, unless I know you work for yourself, or unless I know you don't really have a job, then I'm not going to call you. I think you're asleep. In my mind, you're asleep. So there are a lot of my friends that I don't talk to unless it's on the weekend, unless it's an occasional text message here or there, or unless they're a friend that I met at work. I don't talk to you unless it's on the weekend because that's when I assume that you're off. And even still, I have some friends who work on the weekends. So I have to call them like on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning or a Sunday night. Even still, there are some people who go to church every Sunday. I don't. So, I can't call them Sunday morning. Or if you're in a Baptist church, I can't call you all day because you're in church all day. Because you got the morning service, then you got Bible study, then you got the afternoon service, then you got the evening service, then you got the visiting church coming over, then you got to go to the church that visited you, and then you're there all day. So I can't talk to you on Sunday at all. So let me know, guys, what type of value do you place in friendship? What reasons is it okay to cut somebody off for? And what type of person does it take to just be open-minded enough to go like, hey, I know I'm only going to speak to you a certain amount of time, but that's okay because we're adults and we have other things going on. So sound off in the comments on Spreaker, in the comment section for each show. Of course, reach out to me. I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com. Remember, no apostrophes. And for all the old people out there, it doesn't matter if it's case sensitive or not. Email addresses are never case sensitive. Or you can follow me on Twitter, ITIYL_ITIYL on Twitter. And that's basically the show's initials twice. So on that note, guys, I'm going to sound off. I'm going to go getting ready for work, like I mentioned. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you as far as the Idle Thoughts segment and, of course, just in general about the topics covered today. So until then, guys, I'm signing off. And as always, I'll keep talking if you'll listen. Take care.